morning, everybody, and welcome back. It's Tom Christie back for session 3 of carving a 2/3 size calling Drake Wigeon. In the previous sessions, we got the bird planned out, cut out, the head shaped up, and in this session, I want to add some bill details, get the eyes installed, and maybe, depending on how long it takes, get started on rough shaping the body. There's not a lot of wood to shape up, so these smaller sized carvings go a little quicker. We'll see how far we get today. If you're enjoying my channel, please hit the subscribe button. That does help me out. It's free. I'll keep it that way, and just want to continue to build this channel. The feedback has been very encouraging. I really appreciate comments, suggestions on what you'd like to see. I just kind of make videos as I go, as things that I'm working on that I think are new and not just covering the same old ground. So we'll try to keep it fresh that way. And I want to encourage people to give carving a try. I think it's a great hobby. When you're done with your effort, you have something to show for it. I think that's a real positive. All right, let's get started. All right, I've done a little layout work here. I want to carve in the nail, these end structures, the nostril enclosures, put this separation in here. I'll do a little bit of detail down here, and I want to shape up the tongue a bit. So I've got that penciled out, and then we'll put a little bit of detail in this membrane that connects the upper and lower mandible as well. So let's go to the carving bench, get that carving done. Very small scale here.
Okay, I've got a very small ruby cylinder here, bit, and I'm going to use the edge of that and begin to carve in the bill details that I want to add to the carving. I'm going to start with the nail up here. You've heard me say this before, but this holly is very hard, so it's going to take a little more effort to carve than the tupelo, and that just means running over it more times, having some patience, and just working with the wood, knowing that it's hard. So I've dug in to create a groove there, and now I'm working on either side of that to round out of the groove so that we begin to form this little edge on the outer edges of the upper mandible here. You can see I have to run through that multiple times. This is an old bit as well. It would probably help if I had a little newer bit here to work with this holly, but it's doing the job, so I'll stick with it. Now I'm just rounding the areas around where I've cut those grooves again. Normally I draw a knife along this to begin to form this ridge, but the holly is, again, very hard, so I'm just going to go right to a cut with my grinding tool there, and then same on this side, and then we'll round in both directions so that it's soft. I just wasn't convinced that I could get a deep enough groove just with a knife, so go that direction this time. Now I'm going to go around the perimeter of the nostril enclosures. I got some feedback on previous videos that I wasn't keeping the carving in the camera at all times, and that's really difficult to do if you've ever tried it with nobody moving the camera around. It's a challenge, so I'm trying to do that in this close-up carving so that everybody can see what's going on, see the cuts that are being made. So once I go around the perimeter with the edge of that cylinder, then I'm going back and rounding again out, down below, and up above. So we'll work on this second nostril enclosure, just carving a little groove on the lower edge, now a little groove on the upper, and then rounding the nostril enclosure in both directions. You can see the shadow there. It's beginning to take shape. And I'm just paying attention to symmetry here. It's very easy to get one higher or lower than the other, or one further forward, and it's just that symmetry is important, I think, to the look of the carving. Now I'm using the edge of that bit to grind the lamellae in there. They're not teeth, they're just little edge markings where the bird seins out what it doesn't want the water, and keeps what they want to eat. That's not a very scientific explanation, but I think most of you know what I'm talking about. These get a little smaller as they go to the front of the bird. Sometimes I'll use a wood burner on shaping these. I just decided on this carving to go ahead and use the grinding tool. And now I'm shaping up the tongue. I'm just using my reference, and there's a little bit of a V-shaped front to the tongue here, so I'm rounding the tongue sections, and I had carved a groove down the center of that, and now I'm just using this small bit to kind of further shape up the tongue and make it as accurate as I can at this scale. All right, I'm going to switch bits here and go to this little flame-shaped ruby bit. And the tip of this bit allows me to go around the perimeter of these nostril enclosures and then use the side of that flame-shaped bit to really round out. You can see I'm using the tip there to dig in a little deeper, so I have a little more definition on the lower edge of that nostril enclosure, and then blending that out down below and up above. And once again, rounding the nostril enclosure itself. I'm running this at actual speed because it's such close work. I just didn't want to rush through it visually. And I think you'll be able to follow along better if I just keep this at actual speed. A lot of times I'll speed up, particularly ruby carving, since it's pretty safe. It's not as aggressive as the burrs. So I'm working that other nostril, and I need to make a little adjustment in the forward and backward position of that enclosure, and also the thickness of it. So I'm going to make those changes here by penciling in what I've done so far and making it very visible. You can see that enclosure is just a little bit in front of the other, and they're relatively level, but I need to do a little work to clean that up. The nail looks pretty good, and so do these edges up here. So just a little more work on the nostril enclosure itself. The tongue looks pretty good at this point. I'll need to do some sanding over everything. So I'll get that done with some 150 grit and then come back. All right, I'm back with the flame-shaped bit here, and I'm using the tip of that to basically drill the nostril holes. These are so small. I normally use a little ball-shaped ruby bit, but these were too small for that bit to work, so I'm using the tip of this flame in both directions and just carefully drilling out the nostril holes themselves. Now I want to work on this little connective tissue between the upper and lower mandible, and that tends to have a few wrinkles in it, so I'm just using the edge of this bit going across that ridge that I've created and creating a little bit of texture there. You can see it. Same thing over here. It's another area you could use a wood burner, but for the sake of speed and I like the way this is turning out, I'm just going to use my grinder on this work. There you can see a little bit of wrinkling in that fleshy area. Now I'm going to use my pin vise with a little flame shaped ruby bit and really get in here and work the shape of this tongue and smooth out any carving marks or burr marks. And this tool is really good for this purpose. I'll end up sanding all of these areas as well, but this really gets rid of any remaining ridges I have in the carving that I've done, smooths things out.
All right, now I want to get the eyes mounted. I've got my dividers get a dimension from the tip of the bill here back to the front of the eye on both sides. So I've got those located. I'm going to use a gouge to carefully remove material there and open up the eye sockets. I'm going to use a 9mm brown eye. That could be a little on the large size for this 9-inch bird, but I think I can shape the eye openings accordingly. So I'll open up the other side in the same fashion. All right, I've got one eye mounted. Now we'll flip it over and gonna wet the eye socket. One thing's nice about the epoxy sculpt, I can use it to kind of cover this seam. It'll help disguise the seam between the holly and the tupelo. I apologize, I've got my shop heater on. It's in the teens in Nebraska today, so it's cold. So I just filled the eye socket with epoxy sculpt and then I'm going to work to press this 9mm eye in pretty deep. And that takes some work. So I'll be back when I get this pressed in. All right, I've got the eye pressed in using my finger in water to kind of blend the epoxy sculpt into the surrounding areas, help cover up that seam a little bit. Then I've got a dental tool, but you can use other items to open up the eye and start removing material around the eye so that we can open it back up. And then smooth the material out again. And I'll just keep working this until I get a nice look to both eyes. You can also use, this is an old paintbrush that's been filled up with epoxy sculpt, but it makes a nice kind of stylus to go in and push the material around, open up that eye, and then use the finger to spread that out away from the eye. So I'll keep working that on both sides until I'm happy with the way they look, and then I'll be back. Okay, I've done a little layout work to locate the tail here where it meets the body. Get my primaries sketched in there, the crossed primaries. And I've got the neck location. I'm going to angle this to the left slightly. So now I can go in and do some rough rounding and get things shaped up, and then we can do some more layout work for some of the details that I want to put in here, like the tertials back here, etc. All right, I am going to run this at 2 times speed on this section, and I'm using a 3/4 inch round nose saber tooth burr, fine tooth. And the reason I want to run at 2 times speed is I'm showing quite a bit of carving here, and I just don't want it to get too long and boring, but I want to show everything and not leave things out. So basically, I'm just using this burr to begin to shape up the body, and we want to get everything generally rounded before we add any body details. That'll come later. You can see I'm kind of going down to the center line of the side pocket and then going below there and rounding this area below the side pockets, rounding the breast area and this area behind the neck. This bird is in kind of a stretched up head position with the neck coming out of the body there, so I want to make sure I portray that here and drop some of this down so that there's a little bit of a separation between the breast and the side pocket feathers here. Rounding that other side, getting that area right behind the neck there. Rounding the front. Now I'm pulling against the grain here, so I'm going to go slowly, and now I'm pushing away, which is a more refined approach. If you pull, the way the rotation works on my Fordham is if you pull it towards you, it's going to be more aggressive. If you push it away from you, the rotation is in an opposite direction. It's going to be a little more forgiving. So I just keep that in mind as I'm carving different areas of the bird. Now I'm going to approach this very carefully, but start to remove wood around the cross primaries here and take that down on the sides just to get wood out of the way. And this is an area where I'm carving kind of against the grain. So I'm just being cautious. Getting that wood out on either side with this big bit. And then rounding that wing, just rough rounding at this point, back into the curved shape of the body. Now getting that other side rounded. Now I'm going to switch to a small 1/4 inch cylindrical burr and use this very carefully to go between the cross primaries. I'm using the edge of the burr just to begin to define that V shape. And the reason I say carefully, and I've said this in previous videos, is you're working with a burr against end grain here, and that if you try to be too aggressive, the burr just bites right into that end grain and chatters and jumps. So you want to go at this slowly. Just peel off a little bit of wood at a time, but it's still pretty quick work to get this done. I'm taking that down to where the coverts are. Now I want to drop this lower group of primaries down because they're folded under the other group of primaries. And I'm going to lower that down and also angle them down towards the body.
so that we get that cross shape anatomically correct. Now I'm peeling off some wood. Now that I have that other primary group lowered, it gives me the opportunity to angle these down into the side pocket and begin to take wood out on this other side here, because I need this area to match up with that lower group of primaries that we dropped down on the opposite side so that it makes sense visually. Now I'm going to carefully begin to define the upper edge of the tail feathers here. I've got those penciled in, so I'm kind of following my pencil line and begin to relieve this area so that we can define the upper surface of the tail right here. So I've cut that in a ways, and now I can remove wood above there and kind of ferre that into the supports under the primaries. This is not a competition bird, so I'm not too worried about, in some competition birds, they don't want you to do any severe undercutting of the primary groups. I'm going to undercut these quite a bit since this is more of just a decorative, smaller than life-size bird to sit on the shelf. Okay, I've relieved that area above the tail on this side. Now I can take more wood out here. I am being a little cautious because I want to leave enough wood in here for the tertials to shape them up as they overlap the primary group. So I don't want to cut this too deep and then not have any wood for the tertials. Now I'm just working that other side of the tail up to the center line. Now I'm going under the tail feathers and taking this in to form the rump as it meets up on the lower side of the tail. And I'll make a few cuts in this direction, hard to see, I understand. Then I'll flip it over and work from this direction, going back against the grain here. You'll be able to see this view a little better. Same process here. I'm just carefully going against the grain, removing wood, peeling it out a little at a time. And then rounding that rump area, flipping it over, and then I can finish the lower side of the tail in this direction and match that up with the other side. Now I can go back and round that rump area. I normally am carving on a full-size bird with a 3/4 inch cylindrical burr here. It goes a little quicker, but at this scale, I just decided to go ahead and use the 1/4 inch diameter burr. It takes a little longer, doesn't take off as much wood, but it gives me more control on a small piece like this. So I'm just going to take my time. Okay, that's shaping up pretty good. I want to round this area so that there's no squareness left in that area. Now I can take the bandsaw marks off the side of the tail, round this tip of the tail so it's not too fragile. And I still have a little work to do here on the top of the tail to clean that up. I'm actually not going to show this, but I go back later and undercut these primaries even a little bit more. I just thought it made the bird look more lifelike. All right, using my dividers in the pattern, I've transferred the side pocket, side profile, and top down profile onto the block. And also the cape where it comes up to the front here. So I'll get those carved out before we worry about the tertials and the I'm not gonna carve a big open wing here or a lot of speculum, just this light feather that tucks into the side pocket back here and a few tertials. Call it good. I'm going to use my 3/4 inch diameter cylindrical saber-tooth burr here, like I do on full-size decoys. And following the top-down profile, I'm lowering that to meet the side pocket profile, if that makes sense. And I'll have a little better view here in a second. So you can see I brought that down. It didn't take much on a small scale like this. Now I'm putting a little V shape in the back and dropping this cape down here to meet up with the side profile. I'm just working from the top down now to make sure I hit my top down pattern. And then we can start rounding the scapular feathers here and smooth this out back here where we want to put the tertials in place eventually. And then I can flip it around and begin rounding. Well, first I'll undercut this side pocket just a bit to define the lower edge of the side pocket, and then use my burr here to round the actual side pocket. Coming up to match that top-down profile. Just smoothing that out a bit. It's pretty quick work here to rough shape the body. I'm just going back and cleaning that up where the side and the top down profile meet on the top of the side pocket there. Same thing on this side. Just repeat the process here. Not trying to take too much at a time, but taking 3-4 passes at it to get down to that side profile on the pocket. It's pretty close. Taking that shoulder area down a bit, or where the front of the wing tucks in, and leaving the cape area raised so it's kind of laying over the scapular feathers in back here. And then forming a little bit of a V shape as we go back here on the back. Just so it's not dead flat in the center of the back there. Now I can just round the areas like we did on the other side. I'm going to leave this in because there may be a few better views on this side pocket than I had on the previous. Again, just cleaning up that line, making sure I'm meeting the profile from both directions. And now I can round this side pocket once I've hit both of those target lines. And keep in mind, we don't want to take down the center of the side pocket here because we would narrow up the bird and kind of get out of the profile that we established with the pattern. So I don't want to take any width off of the side pockets from side to side. I just want to round to the center line. Just rounding that area and taking the edge off of this cape so there's not a big harsh edge there. Taking this side down a little bit more to match up with that underlying primary group on the opposite side. All right, I think we'll stop there, do some dimensional checks. I want to check the side pocket here as it meets the front. That looks good. I do these dimensional checks after real rough carving because it's easy to miss a few things and I want to keep things symmetrical. That looks pretty good. The way it drops down there. I'll get one more dimension here on the upper edge of the side pocket. That's right on. And that looks pretty good too. We'll do one more dimensional check here between the wings as they tuck into side pockets just to make sure I'm kind of in the ballpark. That looks pretty close. One more here where the side pockets come up. That's good. All right, I'm going to switch to the 1/4 inch burr again and use that just to clean up some of the rough work I've done with the larger burr. This just lets me get in and clean things up, begin to shape things up, remove any hard edges, any shadows that are cast by places where I haven't smoothed out the wood enough. And this really helps me get down in that area where the scapulars meet the side pocket and clean that up. Also this area where the cape is back here, this is just kind of a cleanup operation prior to sanding. So I'll get that done. Now I'm going to shift to this kind of cone-shaped ruby bit because I need to get in these tight areas under the primaries back here and clean up a lot of the carving that I've done that I couldn't reach with those other tools, and shape up the tail and the coverts and this area between the primaries and really clean a lot of things up here that have just been roughed out. I like this shape because the point lets me get into tight spots, but that angled side gives me some surface that I can use the side of the ruby bit and really cover quite a bit of surface area quickly, like here. And this is prior to sanding. This is really kind of like pre-sanding with this. This is a medium grit ruby bit, which I use almost exclusively. I don't, the fine are just too fine for me. And so medium to rough is good for the work I do on ruby bits. These areas I just couldn't get to with the other tools, so now I can shape that area as the supporting areas under the primaries, because I want to open that up so I have some painting room for tail feathers and covert feathers. All right, I'll speed this up. I'm just going to go over the entire bird with this ruby bit, and then we can get to sanding. So I'm going to use my 1/2 inch sanding drum with 150 grit Swiss sandpaper on it, and go over the entire rough carved bird. I'll just show a little bit of this. You don't need to watch sanding, but it's definitely a necessary evil. Once the rough carving is done, I can power sand a lot of this with this drum and quickly cover the entire bird, and then come back with hand sanding of 80 and 150 grit just to finish things up. So I'll go over the entire bird, get that sanded, and then come back.
All right, just a quick 360 look at the roughed out body. The good back view, you can see nice and round. All right, that's a good place to stop this session. And in the next session, after the epoxy sculpt has dried, we'll do a little bit more work on the eyes, finish up the head and get it mounted to the body. And I also want to do just a little bit of basic carving of the tertials and some other areas on the body as well. And that'll finish up the carving of this bird. I do plan then to do a series on painting this bird. That'll come later, kind of a basic gunning style, probably comb, the vermiculation on it, etc. But that'll come next. I did want to mention one more time, this is a donation bird to a raffle that is going to be held in support of the Pacific Flyway Decoy Association. And they'll make the drawing at their show in July in Sacramento. There are other carvings in that decoy raffle. 3 mini widgeons and a shorebird carved by Anthony Donato, Terry Avila, myself, and Pete Palumbo. Those guys are great carvers. I'm not going to brag on myself, but a great group of birds available. If you're curious at all about how to get in that raffle, you can contact the Pacific Flyway organization at pacificflyway.org, or they're also on Facebook, Pacific Flyway Decoy Association. That'll be, the drawing will be held in Sacramento at the show, July 12th, 2026. And by the way, this is Terry's bird, a beautiful little hen widgeon. It's going to look nice with this and a rig with the other decoys. I hope you'll give it some thought. The funding, the purchase of those, the winner is donating as well as I am to support the Sacramento show. It's been an important decoy show for the carving community for a long time. Great people out there. All right, enough on that. See you next time. Tom Christie signing out.